Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Atlas Lunch and Learn session. Thank you all for attending today. I hope that you find this session to be valuable, and I think Jonathan will do a fabulous job of explaining what the RAC Atlas does today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, so just to note. For questions, please raise your hand on the bottom tab. You will have a question and answer tab and a raise hand tab. As Jonathan is going through the map, if you have any questions while he is showing you something, please raise your hand and we will address it. We'll unmute you and let you ask your question. However, if it's a question related to sort of the functionality of the map, we will have a question and answer section at the end of Jonathan's presentation. So you can put that in the Q&A function. But again, if you do have a specific question when Jonathan is showing something, please raise your hand and we will make sure your question gets addressed. There'll also be a short poll at the end of the session, and we encourage you to fill that poll out. It helps us improve our events going forward, so we would appreciate that. With that, I will introduce Jonathan, who will be giving our presentation today. Jonathan Tebow is RAC's Senior Research Analyst and performs research and analysis to support RAC's various initiatives. He leads the data collection and analysis for RAC's annual publications, including Rail Trends and the Locomotive Emissions Monitoring Report. With over 5 years of work experience in policy and economics, he is well versed in synthesizing data and presenting results in meaningful ways. Jonathan holds a Master's of Arts in Economics from Queen's University. And with that, I will pass it over to Jonathan for the presentation portion. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Great, thank you, Janet. And thanks everyone for joining today. Pretty excited to go over the Rail Atlas. It's one of our tools that, it has a lot of information in there and is quite useful, and we really want it to be used to its fullest potential. So sessions like today will be great to, give refreshers for those who are familiar with the tool and who have lots of experience using it. And then kind of a 101 learning how to navigate the map. And for those users that haven't used it very often, who have only used the public free version for the public, or for those who it's completely new to. So as Janet said, Q&As can be discussed at the end, but if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please jump in with your raised hand, because I want this to be as interactive as possible. And it would be a shame to be moving on and missing your question that was pertinent to the data that we were talking about at that time. So please feel free to jump in at any time. All right, I'm just going to share my screen, and we'll be bouncing back and forth between a PowerPoint and the Atlas itself, just to give you a heads up on that. Okay, so overall, this training today should be, it'll show you what version of the Atlas you can log into. So we have a public version and we have a members version. And the members version is what I want everyone here to be using, because it has a lot more information in it. And it also has a bunch more functionalities, and you're able to create more custom visualizations and extract more specific data. Going over the different base maps, so that will change the visualization, like if it's a very basic white blank slate, or if you want to have terrain or kind of a Google Maps satellite view or a road map. So there's 6 different base maps to choose from. Then we'll go into the layer data. So that's the bulk of the Atlas. So layers are another name for, let's say, groups of data. So the railways, the rail lines themselves will be a layer. The crossings are another layer. So whenever you hear layer, it just means a type of data. And then we're going to look at the toolbars of the Atlas, and then also some various functionalities such as extracting data, printing and saving custom maps, and sharing them on social media platforms. So first things first, I want to make sure everyone logs into the correct version. So I'm actually going to walk through the login. Apologies for those who are very familiar with the Atlas and that this is redundant, but I think it's quite important because looking at the statistics, a lot of people are using the public Atlas, and not many people are always logged into the members Atlas. So I'm just going to quickly go into the how to log into the members Atlas. First, you'll go to the Railway Association of Canada's website, to the members section. I'm hoping everyone has login credentials here. That'll get you to the members site. You scroll down to resources. And apologies, I have 2 screens, so I'll be looking back and forth. Under Canadian Rail Atlas, the portal login is right there. And here you should have specific Atlas login information. It's different from the members website login. So if you don't have a login here, just please shoot me an email and we'll get you connected after the call. That being said, if you don't have them, right now I recommend that you follow along, if you want to follow along, in the public Atlas. So I'll go to the just the normal RailCan website, not necessarily the members one. RAC Initiatives, Canadian Rail Atlas, and then the link in the first paragraph, that will take you to the public Atlas. So this requires no login. Anybody that has access to the website can see this. And you'll see here there's just about 2 or 3 layers of data. So it's not that detailed. And this is, and that's why we encourage you to use the members login. You'll see a lot more useful content. Okay, so once you're logged in, you should be seeing, it should look like this. This is the first view that you'll see when you log in. We were talking about the base maps. So there's 6 different base maps that you project the data onto. So one is an OpenStreetMap. It's similar to Google Maps, but it's public and there's not as many proprietary rights on using it. For Google Maps, we have 4 different Google Maps. We have the road map, terrain, satellite, and hybrid. And most of you should be familiar with this just in your everyday lives. So that'll probably be a preferred base for you to work off of. Then we also have what we call the RAC Base Map, which is just a white blank slate. And that can be useful if you're trying to net out the noise and see specifically the rail data. Or if you're joining it on some other, on top of some other data that you're working with that's outside of the Atlas here. So I'm just going to quickly go through those 6 looks. So here's the default is the Google Maps roadmap. We have the Google Maps terrain. So here you see a bit of mountains, satellite view, and I'm just going to zoom in and show, and then we have the hybrid view where you get some details on the actual towns and roads and all that. Here's the RAC base map. It's just blank, pretty much shows the water, has some provincial boundaries, and then the open streets map, which looks quite similar to the Google's Google road or terrain map. You'll see me bouncing back and forth between these, just depending on what we're trying to do. If we need if we need a location to find out where we're zooming into, we might have one of the active maps on, and then if we want to look at the data specifically, we might drop down to the RAC base map. Okay, so the structure of this lunch and learn is going to go from the most basic to a bit more complex. So if you ingrain these first things, then you'll have the ability to navigate the map, and then later on you'll get the functionalities of saving, extracting, and sharing data. So we're just going to start with the most simple functions. There's a toolbar kind of in the middle left of the screen that just has a home view, a previous view, and zoom in and zoom out functions. So the home button, this is the toolbar here. The home button will bring you to a North American view. So if you're lost in the ocean, this has happened before, and you're not really sure, you don't want to spend too much time navigating, zooming in and out. You can just always hit home and it'll bring you right back to North America. If you were looking at a very specific view, let's say we're in Winnipeg here, and you lost your view like that, rather than trying to find where you were, you could always just hit previous view and it'll bring you right back to where you were. If you went back to home view and you want, oh no, I want to jump back to Winnipeg, quickly hit the last view button and there you are. So that can be useful as well. This isn't always available. Current position, it's not too useful. It wasn't on, it depends on where you log in, but I'm assuming it'll drop a pin where I am, but okay. Well, don't worry about that one too much. And then zoom in and zoom out are pretty self-explanatory, as with any zoom in and zoom out functions. Okay, next we're going to talk about 7 things that if you're not too familiar with, you might be wondering why you're not seeing the data that you're selecting. And if you don't know these 7 things, you might run into some issues. So it's going to go one by one. The first one would be layer visibility. So the Atlas is designed in a way that if there's a lot of data, so for example, mileposts, there's thousands and thousands of mileposts. If we're zoomed out and looking at all of Canada at the same time, and we had all the mileposts pop up, that would just be too much data that it would slow the atlas down and ruin the functionality or the performance. So when the layer data is in light gray, as you can see here, there's some in light gray and then some in dark gray text. The ones in light gray are not showing because they're highly detailed. And until you zoom in further, they're not going to display. So I'll just show an example of that. Well, a good example is crossings. So you can see all these yellow circles with the X's. Those are the level crossings. And the text is dark. But if we're zoomed out, you'll notice that it turned light gray and it's no longer displaying because there's simply too many crossings in this area to all display at once and have the atlas still perform optimally. This is also the case with mileposts. So there's basically a post every mile. So it's even more data than the crossing. So you have to zoom in even further to show that data. And then when you zoom out, it'll drop off quicker. So the crossings are still here, but the mileposts are no longer showing. This is also the case with rail lines. So we have two of the same layers in some cases. Here we have railways zoomed out and railways zoomed in. And that's because the yards are very detailed. And you wouldn't want to be showing all the fine details of those yards with dozens and dozens of tracks across when you're on a zoomed out view, because there's no real use in that. And then it'll also slow down the performance of the atlas. The white versus gray backgrounds for the layers. So if you look at the snapshot over on the right, you'll see three rows here, a couple here, one here and one here. Those have gray backgrounds and they're all caps letters. Those, if you check mark those boxes, there's no actual data behind that. The data itself is on the layers below with the white background. You have to have the check marks in the gray selected to see the data in the white. So for example, on the rail lines, we have rail lines selected here, and there's three gray layers above it. All of these check marks need to be selected to view the data. If one of them is off, it disappears. This can be a bit confusing, but if you're not seeing the data, but you have your rail lines checked off here, it could be because one of the gray boxes above it is not checked. Viewing the full name of the layer. So unfortunately, this toolbar cannot be spread wider, and you'll notice that a lot of the names of the layers are cut off. You'll just have to hover over and wait. So you'll see the word operation was cut off. Now you'll see all rail lines in operation. The next layer looks the same, but then when you wait, you'll see that it's the same layer but zoomed out. So there's a few of those, so just be patient and wait for the name to pop up. It can be a bit frustrating, but it's worth knowing. There's also 3 dots beside lots of the layers, and that just gives you more information. So we have all rail lines in operation. We click the 3 dots, and then we see the reason that there's blue, there's red, there's various colors, and it's just telling you the blue is CN, red is CP rail. The other colors are for various other short lines or passenger railways. And you can actually turn off this color palette if you like, and then it just becomes all one color. So sometimes if you're trying to get a different view, you can click the three dots, and there might be an option there depending on the layer. The right arrow into the magnifying glass. So that would be, if you see this right arrow here that appears when you're on the layer, you click it and there's a magnifying glass here. That will bring you to the to a view that hones in on the layer on that layer specifically. Most of the layers in our data set span all of Canada. So if we're going to look at here, for the rail lines, we're going to get to an all Canada view. We have some data specifically on public services in Quebec. So if you see these green check marks, if we were to hit the specific view with the magnifying glass, we'll zoom into Quebec. So this just gets you, brings you to the layer, zooms you in or out, depending on the spread of the data and what your current view is. The right arrow and then the 3 upside down horizontal lines in the shape of a triangle. Not sure the technical term for that. But those are the new filters. So filtering is a new function that was added to the Atlas just about 2 or 3 months ago. And it allows you to look at specific data without seeing everything. So if you only wanted to look at 1 or 2 railways, or only the federally regulated railways, or maybe commuter railways. You can filter out and select only those ones, and only those will display. I'll do an example with let's go with crossings. So sometimes the layer itself is filter. You can filter most layers, but sometimes they have a specific filter for crossings down here. So you can't filter the individual types of crossings here. We just move the filter here, and you can work with it all in one spot. So these three little lines in the triangle here, that's where you go to your filters, and then you can really specify what you want to see. So one example would be we want to see crossings that have no type of warning, maybe, if we're concerned about which crossings have no lights, bells, or gates. So we went to warning, which is we can call them attributes, whether it's what level it's at, what type of crossing, what type of access, public versus private roads. And then we want to go none. So which crossings have no warning signs? And then if we turn, so you can see all these crossings, and then there's lots there. Maybe the ones without that are not at level don't have warning signs, since there's no need if there's no road crossing it. So now we can look at level, at grade, and then narrow down to those ones. There we go. So here's the list, or a view of all the crossings at grade without any warning signs in, I guess, Ontario and Quebec. And then mousing over. So if you want to quickly see what is behind some data, you can just put your mouse over it and click, and you'll get a quick information report that describes all the attributes of, in this case, that crossing, or if you click the rail line, in that case, the railway. Okay, so with those the basic toolbar and those 7 annoying things that might prevent you from seeing the data you wanted, we're pretty much ready to explore the data set. I mentioned that there's a railway zoomed in and zoomed out view, and we're going to explore Vancouver and show an example of why that's put that into practice, why we have it like that. On this left view, you see the zoomed out version where you see the main lines. Then on the right, you see how detailed a yard could be. And if you were zoomed out to this extent and you saw all this detail, again, the performance would be slow. I'll go to the base map just for simplicity. So I want you to pay particular attention to these 2 right here. So this layer is for the rail lines that are zoomed out, and this one is for the same data but zoomed in. So right now we're seeing it in a zoomed out fashion. As we zoom in, this will turn light gray and disappear, and this one will be activated. So it'll switch. And there. So now we're in the zoomed in view. So you might not see it from here, but the data on all those tracks, all those yard tracks, are now displaying because we're in a small enough view that it won't slow the Atlas down too much. And then we'll just zoom in on that yard that we were showing in the PowerPoint. You'll see how detailed this information really is. All right, so that's why there's 2 levels of railways, if you're wondering about that one. We also have railways option to display it in the colors. I also showed how you can turn off the palette and it all goes brown. And then there's also an option just to have it as a gray color. So that's more useful if you're trying to bring attention to some other data, but you still want to have some knowledge of the network there. So lower down and under the Canadian Railways layer, you'll see Canadian Railways initial view gray, which is initial view means zoomed out, and then Canadian Railways zoomed in gray. So if you click those, you'll see a faint outline of the network, and then you can zoom in on you can really hone in on the data that you're interested in. So for example, you might be interested in aluminum production facilities, and then you don't have to have all that noise and color from the railways themselves. We'll also just take a quick look at the different types of stations that we have in our atlas. So we have freight stations, We have Via Rail, commuter stations. You'll see they're kind of grouped around Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and there's a couple in Ottawa. So there's not too much to say about stations, just showing you another layer that we have. Then we're going to explore a couple other layer data that we have. So level crossings is quite a useful layer, and I know there's lots of policy around crossings and discussion. So we'll zoom into a crossing, and you'll be able to see what kind of data is available for each crossing. All right. So here you'll see what the level. So some of them are at grade, some will be over or under the road, or just no interaction with no actual physical interaction with the other mode of transportation that crosses it. But at grade is usually the focus in terms of safety. When it says type, we have road. There could be trail in there instead, where there's no vehicles, but there's bicycles and pedestrians that cross the railway. Access here is unknown. The other options are private and public, so it's unknown in the data set that we pulled from to create this. But we'll just go to another one, and we'll see that there's a private road that crosses the track. There's no warning signs, and it's a local street. So we have the type of street that crosses. Going into a city, we're hoping that we'd see, maybe there's a crossing with a lot more warnings. So here we have a crossing in the Toronto area. It's at grade. It's a public access road. It has flashing lights, bells, gates, and activated arm. So it's got lots of safety features. It has details on the type of street and even the road name. So you'll be able to identify the exact crossing. We have data on federal ridings and provincial ridings. So that is something that we use quite a bit when we're trying to advocate to MPs and MPPs on, the impact of the railways. And if they're not too aware of the railways that are in their ridings, this is a great tool to show them. So we'll just turn on the rail lines. Then down in the administrative boundaries, we have ridings. Take a look at federal ridings. We include data on the party and the member. So if we'll go, for example, here, you have the riding and the affiliation and the member. And then you can zoom into a particular riding and see, did you know CP and CN both cross your RAC? So that's an interesting tool as well. RAC Transcare training events are included in here. So we'll just take a look at a couple of those. Here we go. So the Transcare data shows the specialists that performed the training, the date, location, what type of individuals participated. So we have firefighters, paramedics, other first responders, and municipal officials, also attendance, and where the individuals came from. So they might come from surrounding areas for the training. In that, this one's near Toronto, but we had people from all over Ontario. Okay, so that was just a quick a look at some of the layers. Next, we can really go into the toolbars, and we'll always be exploring the layers as we're explaining these toolbars. And we've already covered this first one here with the home view and the zoom in, zoom out. Next, we'll look at this bottom right corner. This is where we can do custom zooms. So you may have noticed with the plus minus, the jumps are quite large, and you might want a view that is halfway between two jumps. So you can customize your zoom level. And then you can also plug in some coordinates and go exactly to that location on the map. So we're going to quickly go over this toolbar. If you'll, we'll start with the main view. And you can see in this bottom corner, we're at a ratio of 1 to 27 million. And the next zoom is 1 to close to 14 million. If we wanted a view of around 1 to 18 million, all you have to do is click, and you can type in your custom number. And then you get that level of zoom. So that one's pretty straightforward. The coordinates are a little bit more complicated, so there's a couple things to note. The best way to insert coordinates on this is to use the longitude latitude projection down here. And also we're doing longitude then latitude, whereas if you went to Google Maps and checked a coordinate, it would be reversed. So make sure that you swap the position before entering, or else, like I said, you might end up in the ocean, and that's why the home button is very useful. So I'll just do an example of locating the Railway Association of Canada using this tool. So if you went to Google Maps, you can right-click a pin, and it'll give you the coordinates right there. So the one on the left, we're going to be putting in on the right on ours. So 45.42. I already have it, so we don't have to waste time. And then the other one is minus 75,700. And we have the longitude, latitude, not the pseudo Mercator. And then you'll see a pin dropped right at that location. If we were to zoom, and here's a case where you might want to activate one of the, not the base map, but one of the more detailed maps. And then you can see it's where the association is, downtown Ottawa. All right, and that's it for that bottom right toolbar. Then we have a toolbar at the top left. This one is going to, navigating through this will be probably the bulk of today's presentation. So the selection tool, which is the arrow here, that is going to be your way to extract data out of the atlas. So you'll be able to select your layers and then hover and do a geographical selection of the data points that you want to pull. And then you'll be able to create PDFs, Excel files, and you can also choose which attributes you want to include in your extraction. Some measurement tools, you can measure distances and areas in the atlas. Some other interesting ones would be you can get a Google Street View. So if you were, for example, I like to use the example of crossings. If you notice there is one of your crossings and you zoomed into it, you could put down an individual and see exactly what that crossing looks like in terms of the number of tracks and buildings and other characteristics. You can do some annotations, so you can add labels and shapes, and that can help you create your custom map that you might want to do a presentation with. And then the printing and these, there's some sharing functions. So we'll go through all this. Don't worry about the slides. We'll just go one by one through the atlas. The three horizontal lines here, that's very basic. It just hides and displays the menu on the side, so you get a better view. This one is the one that's quite useful. So the punctual selection, this is the selection tool where you create an area and then you pull out that data into a report. Punctual selection is just a point, so that's only useful to extract one piece of data. So if we use the punctual selection, we would just go this, and then you'd have the just that very small area. If you use a rectangle, you just click once, create your area, click again. It might take a bit longer, but right now, there we go. The atlas, notice that there was 25 transcare events in that location, and it selected the data for all the rail lines in that area. There aren't actually 179 railways, but the data is organized into sections of subdivisions, and that's why it seems like a high number. So whatever data you have displaying on your map based on your layers over here, that is what this tool is going to extract. So let's say that we wanted to have all the industrial facilities around Quebec. We wanted to have many crossings, and we have the railways as well. Give it a second there. It's a lot of data. Okay, and then if we use the selection tool, let's grab a smaller area so it doesn't take too long. All right, so here you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different layers. So we have data on, we just selected data on level crossings, tracks in operation. I actually have industrial facilities, tracks. So we have two things for crossings. My bad, I had two selections on. I'll redo that. There we go. So we have level crossings, industrial facilities, and the rail lines. And you can only extract one layer at a time. So right now, the first one is crossings. And if we go through the steps, we're only going to be extracting data for crossings. If we wanted the industrial facilities, all you have to do is switch the one that you're clicking. I'll go through the different extractions in a minute, but first we're going to go through the toolbars. Another way to make your selection is Polygon, and this is the most customized because you create the exact shape you need. So I'm just going to do an example of if you want to extract the data for the Maritime specifically. And I'm going to turn off crossings because it's just too much data. So here, if you used a rectangle, you'd accidentally capture some data from Quebec, maybe Newfoundland. So here we can do an exact selection. You just keep on clicking and it'll continue to create your custom shape. And then double click when you're done. And there you have the industrial facilities that are only located within that area. And the reason this 271's up there, that's one of the rail lines, and that's because it's the same line here through this ferry. So that's why that clicked up there, but you get exactly that selection that you wanted. There's another type of selection that you wouldn't think would be too useful as a line, but there's a couple applications. So just as a random example, if let's say a road was proposed to be built from Riding Mountain National Park straight to the US. It's not practical, let's just say that was going to happen. And you wanted to know how many additional railroad crossings that new road would create. You could do a line selection and you go from the national park to the US. I have to finish it with a double click. 7. So we crossed 7 rail lines. So that gives you an idea of the crossings that you've just created by building that road. There's not probably many functions or usefulness for that line. I think the Polygon is probably the most useful one. Just quickly, we'll go over this radius circle. If you wanted to look around Winnipeg and the surrounding area, you just start with the circle in the middle, go out, and then you'll get the radius selection. Okay, so that's good for selection tools. Next will be the distance measurement. So this can be used to measure point A to point B. If you're trying to estimate the length of a track, you could look at the subdivision distances. We have details of that. If you were to click, you'd see starting kilometer and ending kilometer. And that's one way to do it. Another way would be just to estimate by using the measurement tool. And you can continue to make different lines as you go. And that's just a distance measurement. Double click always to finish your measurement. When it's blue, it's activated. There's an X here, it deactivates it. These tools are a little bit different each, so it's a bit hard to remember the way to activate and deactivate them. But blue is typically activated, and then once you hit the X, we'll deactivate it. You can use surface measurement like a polygon or a circle to get an area and each distance. So if you're looking around Winnipeg, we have these few measurements, and then we can get the area of. It's stuck because the text is behind the arrow. Let's start again. Oh, my bad. There you go. So you get the perimeter and you get an area measurement. If you're maybe acquiring a parcel of land to build a new yard, you could use this tool to estimate the size of that land. There's the information report. So this is a way to, as I showed earlier, you could hover over a piece of data and click it, and then it'll tell you the information on that. If you want it in a quickly extractable PDF format, there's the information report button here. So you do everything the same, and it'll take you to an actual file. And then from here, you extract it as Excel or PDF or Word document in your preferred format. We have the Google Street View. So if you're interested, we could, look at a yard maybe and see what you can see from the public areas, because Google won't be in the private land necessarily, but maybe try to take a look. Yeah, so there's no spot there. It's pretty straightforward. It just drops you to that location and you can take a look around. We have Google Directions, so we're not going to go over that because you can use straight up Google Maps if you're looking for directions. And then we have Annotations. So I'll be honest, the Annotations are not the most user-friendly tool, but you can do some add some text and some drawings to the map. So let's say this was a point of interest here around Glacier National Park. You could do an annotation where we add some text and something like point of interest, and you can add some details, and then you just simply erase the annotations when you're done. So that's annotations are a useful tool. There are some other applications you can pull this data into if you're really well versed in GIS that have more options, but there's some basic options here. And then these are all part of the annotations, and then there's the printing function. So if you like what you see and you want to quickly print it out, you can just hit print. And right now we're on some base maps don't allow you to print, but if we were to go to the basic RAC map, you can print straight from there, add some titles to your file. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll next go to the functions on the top right corner of the screen. The first one is the overview map. So this will tell you where you are within the broader map. So if you look at the top right, it shows that we're in Eastern North America. And as we move, it'll move with you. Then also you can click, it might work better if we're more zoomed in. So you can see we're in Southern Saskatchewan, and you can move this to move your view. Well, this is simply to go to full screen. And then here are your share functions. So if you want to create a link where you could send to somebody and it would bring them exactly to the view that you're seeing, you can just hit link to this map and copy it and send it along. You can also embed this map and then add it to websites. You can create an image. Sometimes this function doesn't. Okay, it did work. There's some finicky things about the Atlas there. We just created a quick, this is probably better than using the print function because it works with, I believe, all base maps, and then you can print from there. Test that out. Yeah. And then we have our social media platforms. So you have a Facebook, you'd have to log in, LinkedIn, and Twitter as well. Finally, the last function would be, I guess, preferences here. So right now, the default display is having everything in kilometers. As you can see, when we did the perimeter and the distance measurement, we had kilometers here. You can change that to miles or even more detailed, finer degrees of measurement, such as all the way to millimeters. I recommend probably kilometers or miles. And then I would keep this as degrees, minutes, seconds for the coordinates to function properly. And then rotation is just if you want the map turned in a certain angle just for visual appeal, you can do that just by clicking up or down. Okay, so that was quickly going over all the toolbars. We do have some functions such as extracting layer data, searching and creating custom maps, and then also going through the filters. So before we jump into any of those, I think I'll take a pause here if anyone had questions about the Atlas logging in, the layer data, or any of the toolbars. Just give it 30 seconds or so.
Hey, Jonathan, we actually have a few questions.
Great.
Will you make this presentation available to the attendees here today?
Yeah, so the PowerPoint can be shared, but I don't know about the recording of navigating the atlas, but the presentation for sure.
Perfect, thank you. I think you addressed this about the exporting reports into Excel. So if somebody wanted to see the grade crossings, if they could export that into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, so that's the next thing we're going to go into.
Okay.
I know I briefly mentioned it without going into it, but now that we're done with the toolbars, we'll go into that next.
Okay, and then just one last question and then we can continue on. Okay, so how often do the details of the atlas get updated? Also, if I enter my setting layers, do they remain as my default every time I log in?
No. Okay, that's two good questions. So the first one is about the frequency of updates. The atlas is usually updated about every 6 months. There was an update in April, and I think we're going to do one more update before the end of the year. So if there are any, throughout that 6-month period, if there's anything that's not correct, we make notes of it and we start working on it on the back end. And then when about 6 months comes and we have a sufficient amount of updates, then we refresh the atlas at that 6-month mark. And in terms of the selections and restarting your view, so when you come back, it's always going to be the default view. However, you can create, which is one of the things we're going to go into before the end of today, is creating something called My Maps. And when you do that, you get back to the exact, you can save multiple different custom visualizations with the zoom, the location, and the layers that you desire. Create a My Map, and then next time you log in, you'll go to the default view, but then you can access your custom map, and then it'll reset all the filters to where you want it to be. So yes, you can, but it's not going to be the very default, but you'll click 2 buttons and then you'll be there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. I think that's it for questions for now.
Okay, great. Okay, continuing on. So we were talking about extracting the data. So you can extract data in PDF and Excel files. And you can also, you'll notice that there are many, many attributes for lots of the layers. So for example, a crossing might have 20 details about it. Maybe you only want 3 or 4, and you can extract it in that format. I had some examples here. I'm going to be bouncing around, so maybe I'll just wing it. Let's see, transcare events. Okay. Transcare. I'm going to turn off the other layers just for simplicity. I'm going to erase my annotation or there we go. Okay, so you'll use your selection tools that we just went over. We'll just use a quick rectangular selection and grab a few of the events out west. There's about 30 events in southern Alberta. And here's where you can either quickly extract it right here as an Excel file. So I'll just show you, you get it here. And you'll notice there's nearly about 20 attributes for each event. So we have the host, railway, transportation, dangerous goods, the RAC individual that did the training, Curtis Meison's active out there, the date, the month. Maybe you only want to know the date and the month. So that quick way of extracting it, you're getting everything. Another way is to first go to the information report here, or the selection report. And from here, you export the data, but you have options of selecting the exact information you want. So if we wanted to know the date, then you just hit the arrow over. And these are the attributes that we're selecting. And we wanted to know how many people were there, total participants, and in let's say in which province. So we have our desired attributes of the Transcare training events within our selection that we did. And then you would be able to create that file, and you'll notice there's only 3 columns of data. and there seem to be missing dates, but maybe it's in a different format. There might be month, year, and then some of the dates aren't showing. Okay, some of them are probably previous, are older, and then the date wasn't recorded at that time. I'm not too sure why that's missing. Do another example, industrial facilities. Actually, we'll do an example with both, because that's another important thing. Okay, so you have 2 layers of data displaying here. Let's say you even had the railways as well. And then you make your selection. We'll just do Northern Ontario because not as much data as Southern. And then you want to extract the industrial facilities, RAC event locations, or the rail lines. Let's say we wanted to do industrial facilities. Make sure that you're clicked on industrial facilities, going to the information report, and then from here, exporting the data, and then again, picking the characteristics that you are most interested in. For example, industrial sector. Also, you can quickly export this report as a PDF or a document. So that's the second arrow button on the information report. And there's your PDF. Okay, and then troubleshooting. So in some cases, I know at the beginning we talked about a few things that might be frustrating, and you might not be getting the data that you think you've selected, and it's not working for some reason. And it could be because the data, there's an option to have the data selectable versus not selectable. So right now, when I did that selection, we have 3 layers of data displayed, and it extracted the data, or it presented the data to be extracted for all 3 layers. That's because these little blue arrows beside the layers are in blue. If we clicked it and it was gone or dark when you hover over, that layer is no longer selectable. And now when I do my selection, I will not see, I only have 2 here. So I'm not getting the rail lines in operation anymore. So if that was something you were interested in and it wasn't selectable, you're not going to be able to grab it. So all you have to do is turn it on and then make your selection again. One more thing about the just for visual, when you do the information extraction. Right now you can't see much. It's about 1 or 2 rows at a time. You can hit this button over here with the upward arrow, and then you'll see the same information in a new tab, and you get the whole page. So you can see multiple data points at once. The search function. So you can narrow in your search. You can look in many different ways. You can look for railways by what province they're in, who their regulator is. There's just many attributes that you can search all the data by most of their attributes. And you can also do multiple attributes to get a very narrow search. And then what the Atlas will do is it will highlight that data and have it in a format that's easy to extract. So we're going to do an example. We want to see all the railways in Abbotsford, British Columbia, for example. So you would hit search, which is just over here. We want to look at the railways in Abbotsford. That would be sorry, subdivision. Maybe I did Abbotsford for a different indicator. My bad. But if we'll just do a different example with a province. We can look at all the railways in New Brunswick, and we can specify them to be, let's go with freight railways only. Oh, this isn't gonna work. And then there you see all these, the highlights with all these numbers. The reason, again, why there's so many is because the rail lines are portions of subdivisions, and each of them are a data point. We see that there's, we'll see CN. We'll go to the bigger table. It's going to be a bit slower because there's over 1,000 data points there. But it basically allows you to quickly extract if you wanted to get all the track data for all the freight railways in New Brunswick without making a selection with the selection tool, because that would be difficult to carve out the exact rail lines. You could filter down to those rail lines and then extract. So there's too many items that slowed down. So there's a couple different workarounds you could. So the Atlas just crashed. Let's hope it comes back. I hope it didn't crash for all of you. I know there's probably lots of us on it right now. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so another option would be to use the railway filters, which we'll go over soon, and you can narrow down and then do your use your selection tool, or you could just do the search tool and get to the same result. Another example we'll do with the search, level crossings on farms in Alberta. Just made these up on the spot. I wish it was a bit more interactive without the mute, because then you could shout out some interesting selections that we could make together. So that was. So we're looking at crossings in Alberta at grade, and on the farm. And then we have 499 identified grade crossings on farms across Alberta. And then again, you can, it'll have all the attributes, you know, the railways that own the, or that are present at those crossings, what type of track is at that crossing. We'll go to the information report, it's a bit easier to read. You can see the MPs in that area, where it is on the subdivision. Don't worry, these details are not available in the public atlas, it's only for members. And what type of track we're on, main track, siding. So lots of details on those, on the crossings. All right, so Janet brought up one of the questions from one of you about getting back to the view that you desired when you leave. So my recommendation would be to create your custom maps, and you can create many and save them all, and it's not too difficult. So we can basically, we'll turn that off. Let's say that we really wanted to look at industrial facilities in northern Quebec. And we wanted to come back and we wanted to start our session with this exact view and this exact selection. You just go to My Maps right here, hit plus, and just create your map. And then when you arrive at your Atlas again and you log in, you can you just hit Quebec Industrial Facilities. Bring you right back to where you were. And if you look at the layers, it will, I know I kept them, but it will have the right selections here. For example, I recently created another map, Hudson's Bay Railway and industrial facilities around it. So I can quickly jump over to that one. And there's that view. And it'll also, I believe, keep the base map that you selected. So in that case, I used the RAC Base Map. In this one, I used the Google's map. We can just do another example so you can see, just for interest, we'll do short lines and company-owned railways, industrial facilities in southern Saskatchewan. So we had industrial facilities are already activated. We'll zoom into southern Saskatchewan. And the other characteristic was we only want to see short line and company railways. So that's where our filters will come in. So the big bold letter or caps letters here is filters for Canadian railways. I'll show you more details about this in a second. I know it's going quickly. There. So those are the non-class 1, basically non-class 1 freight railways in Saskatchewan and how close they are to the industrial facilities. And then you could save that if you like. My maps plus. And then you can come back anytime. So that is my maps. It's a pretty useful tool. And now we'll go into, this will actually, we're doing good for time. This will be the last thing to go over, and then we can have a full discussion and explore if there's any data that you've been thinking about when you're throughout this presentation. You know, for example, you might want to see the industrial facilities that are within some sort of proximity to your railway. You might want to take a look at protected lands that are near your railway, just to be aware. You can also see indigenous lands near your railway. We can explore all the different layers and zoom into the geographic region that you're most interested in. But before we do that, last thing, we'll go through the filters. So it was just April 23rd, so when we added this ability. And this will allow you to extract, sometimes there's just too much data on the map and you're not seeing the individual data points that you want to see. And filters are really useful. And since we've added them, I've been using them a lot, and I'm sure once after this presentation, you'll do the same. So some layers have filters, and then sometimes we have it in a different location. It might be a bit complicated at first, but in use, you'll get used to where they are. So our main rail line and operation layers here, they don't have the filters, but we added them down here. We did the same with crossings. So we have all these different types of crossings, then filters for crossings is separately. But sometimes that's not the way we did it. So I'll find another example. There we go. So for proximity guidelines, we can use filters straight. There's only one option, and then we can filter that option. We don't have to find another layer. So it just depends on what we're looking at. Same with milepost, I believe. So you'll have mileposts, and then you can filter straight from there. But for crossings and rail lines, we did it differently because there's just so much data. And then another thing to note, because we have a zoom in and zoom out layer for railways, whatever selections filtering that you do, make sure that you do it on both the zoomed in and zoomed out layer, because it might look perfect for you, and then as you zoom in and it switches to the other zoomed in layer and it drops the zoomed out layer, your filters won't be applied. So you have to make sure it's done on both. So right now we did the railways are short lines and company railways, but we didn't do that on the zoomed out layer. So I'll just show you as we zoom out, all the class 1s are going to appear. Okay, that's actually my bad. These rail lines switch, but these ones seem to just stay. Or we were always zoomed out, my bad. So now as we zoom in and it switches, the class 1s are back. Yeah. So now we'll have to apply it to the zoomed in version as well. So you can, there's many ways to do the filters. It's usually best to do equals and then what you're looking for. Sometimes you could do not equals to, so you could either select show the short line railways or show everything except the short line railways. For variables that have years, so for example, the years in which the Transcare events took place, you could look from 2010 to 2012. Like you could do a range, you could pick a set of years, or you just have to play with these different options. So we'll go with equals the carrier category. We're going to do the same one that we did for the zoomed out. You have to hit OK, and then it's going to maintain the short lines and company railways, regardless of how zoomed in or out we are. We'll dig in a little bit to the crossings. and show the various filters, because you can do more than just one type of filter. You can have multiple filters on the crossings and really narrow down. So we'll go with at grade. So we want equals the level to be at grade. And then you just add another one right here. We want them to be, for the access to be public. We're concerned about the public ones, not so much the private ones, let's say. We can pick a specific region. I think we have province in here. We can look at New Brunswick. No, let's pick, what have we not picked yet? Maybe Manitoba. And we can look at highways specifically. So road class and expressway highway. So now we're going to be looking at specifically out of the thousands of crossings that are in the data set, we're going to hone into Manitoba on those public highways that have at-grade crossings. Let's hope there aren't too many. There we go. So you can see it's a lot less than if we were to turn off the filter. And then you can really, yeah, this tool is so powerful because it really allows you to focus on what you're interested in. I don't know if I have any other examples for the filtering. The options are limitless, but maybe during our Q&A we can do some that you're interested in. With that being said, just a quick recap of everything we went over today. First off, most important is logging into the correct atlas. We have the public version and we have the members version, and you're going to be missing out on a lot, not just the data, but then also the functions if you're not logged into the members one. So if you don't have a login, make sure to email me and I'll connect you with credentials. Next, you can select your preferred base map. So you can see a blank white slate to place your map on. You can use Google Maps with terrain, with satellite view, or you can look at just the road map. Exploring all the layer data. So the layer data, we refresh it about every 6 months, and there's lots of different details in there. All the different toolbars, so you can zoom in, zoom out, do your different selections, and then all the functions such as sharing on social media, printing your maps. And then most importantly, for me and maybe for a lot of you, is extracting the data. So extracting custom data sets as efficiently as possible. And then again, this is a big tool, and I'm sure we skipped over a lot of things and we didn't dig deep into everything. So if you ever need any assistance, I'm always happy to do like a one-on-one with you or with you and your team, and we can make sure that the tool is easy to use for your organization and that you can find the most use in it. I'm always free, so just shoot me an email. And with that, I'll conclude, and we'll open it up for Q&A.
Awesome, thanks, Jonathan. That was a really great presentation. A few things have come in that maybe we can address before I get to the Q&A. Some people have asked whether multiple people from a company can have user access, and the answer is yes to that. So if you do have any, if two people within your company have access, but you need more, just send an email to Jonathan, CC myself, because I'll make sure that the back end is covered off as well. So just wanted to address that question for all those present. Jonathan, do you have access to railway traffic data?
So there's no rail traffic data embedded in this. So that's, and I don't think there's a plan to add that to this, especially not the public version. But yeah, at the moment there's no traffic data.
But our Rail Trends publication may address some of that.
Sorry. Yeah, outside of the Atlas, we have other reports that, yeah, the Rail Trends data, the Rail Trends report that's put out every year shows traffic levels, different products by carload and RTMs, revenue ton miles, tonnage, all those details, and that's on our resources page of our website.
Thanks, Jonathan. We have a sort of, maybe you can show somebody how to do this. Can you generate a list of sightings on a specific subdivision?
I believe so. So, okay, I'll just turn off the There we go, we're on a blank slate. Okay, so Canadian Railways. We would want to do type of track. Do we have sidings? I've definitely seen, we have some details on, let me just take a quick look.
Sorry, Jonathan, puts you on the spot, eh?
Yeah, I know that like when we looked, like I said, when we looked at, you look at crossings and some other details, it says if it's crossing a main line or a siding or a spur. So we might be able to do that. I'll have to, yeah, I think I'll take that one offline. But so I'm just gonna write it down so I don't forget.
Okay, and I can let you know who to get back to, Jonathan, on that one.
Yeah.
I think with anything too, it's the more you play around with the Atlas, the more familiar and comfortable you'll get with the tool.
Yeah, maybe actually in the search function here, you might have track classification, siding. There we go. And let's just pick a, what's a subdivision that would likely have many sidings? I'm not sure. We'll just let's just click a random one. There we go. Okay. So yeah, there you go. There's quite a few sidings along the Belleville subdivision, which would be CP's rail. Yeah. So you steps to get there would be going to the here to the search, Canadian Railways, and then you're doing your track classification, and then the subdivision of your choice.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Can I create a report with the subdivision name, miles, and attributes?
Names, miles, and attributes. Okay, so we'll get rid of the sidings, and we'll pick a rail. So we can filter. I still have some filters now. There we go. So you would click your subdivision that you're interested in. And then let's just say Aberdeen. Okay, so we'll get to the subdivision. There may not have been data for that one. Yeah, so basically when you do the information report, you'll have details on all the all the kind of the legs within that subdivision. Belleville looked pretty active, so we'll just go back. And sorry, what were the details that they're interested in?
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. Just a subdivision name, miles, and attributes.
Yeah, so you would, here we use the filter to get just that one subdivision. And then you could use your selection tool and make sure you encompass that whole subdivision. And here's your 4 data points in your information report. It's getting slower. and this would include your, you can see here, start of subdivision, end of subdivision. You have the, this one starts, you know, at mile 196 and goes to 206, and the length of each one. Some of them are only about a mile. But yeah, you have all the details on that. The information report seems to be slowing down, so I'm not too sure if we're overloaded. But
and you could save this?
Yeah, so I just hit Excel instead of the information report, and there you go. So you have
Awesome.
all the data for that one subdivision there.
This is a great tool. And the last question that we have coming in so far, so if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to keep them coming because we're still good on time. Is it possible to make a cheat sheet of all the functions, Jonathan, or do you have something like that that's already created?
I think the best tool would be the presentation that I'll share afterwards. It's sometimes I'll make sure it goes through a bit of the steps for each one. There's also, I forgot to mention, under here, you can go straight to help, and that brings you to a user manual. And here you can go through this one, and it'll hopefully touches on. It's longer than the presentation that I would share. It's 75 pages, so it might be a bit harder, but it will have descriptions of all the tools and all the functions. I'll make sure that I'll take another look at the presentation, just make sure that it walks you through it a bit better. And then also on the members website, I'll show you one more thing. Since the filters are relatively new, there's a resource here, April 2021 update and filtering function instructions. And this is starting here. It walks you through how to use the filters and gives you a couple examples to try. But again, if you want, I'll share the presentation and you can take a look at the resource. But then I'd be happy to know exactly what you would like kind of a cheat sheet on, and I could develop that.
Excellent. I'll let you know who it was who asked that question, and we can discuss offline. So that seems to be it for the questions, Jonathan.
Okay. Well, in that case, thanks everyone for taking over an hour to listen to me talk about the Atlas. And again, like I can't emphasize enough to keep on reaching out to me if you have any questions. I want this Atlas to be used to its fullest potential. And I want everyone to log in and actually use all those extra layers that we put a lot of work into adding. So yeah, please, hope this was useful, and please don't hesitate. Thanks for showing up.